Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Larry inherited his family's workshop, he never imagined it would become the battleground for a showdown with Sunny Ridge's notorious HOA president, Karen. What started as a parking dispute spiraled into a high-stakes conflict of power, justice, and property rights, culminating in a lesson the neighborhood would never forget. Larry was a craftsman at heart, a man who found solace in the hum of saws and the scent of freshly cut wood. His small workshop on the edge of a charming town was more than just a place of business. It was a sanctuary of creativity and tradition. The property passed down to him by his beloved uncle held years of memories and represented his family's hard work and resilience. The sprawling lot included a well-equipped workshop and a modest parking area reserved for his loyal clients, who often praised Larry's skill in crafting bespoke furniture and restoring beloved antiques. The lot was well marked as private property, with clear signs at every entrance. Larry had always been mindful of keeping the space organized and professional, ensuring that his clients felt welcome and that the property retained its charm. To him, this workshop wasn't just a livelihood, it was a testament to his passion and the legacy of his family. Nearby, however, a very different world was taking shape. The elite housing development known as Sunny Ridge had recently sprung up, boasting rows of meticulously manicured lawns, pristine driveways, and opulent houses that glimmered under the sun. Its residents prided themselves on perfection, and their homeowners association, HOA, enforced strict rules to maintain it. But the HOA wasn't just strict, it was oppressive, micromanaging everything from the shade of residents' curtains to the number of garden gnomes allowed on display. Karen, the newly elected president of the HOA, was the embodiment of this relentless drive for control. Known for her domineering personality and sharp tongue, Karen had a knack for making neighbors feel small while asserting her authority. Under her rule, the HOA implemented increasingly rigid regulations that pushed the boundaries of fairness and decency. For Karen, maintaining order wasn't just a job, it was a mission. The stage for conflict was set when Karen decided that Sunny Ridge needed to resolve its growing parking issues. With narrow streets and a recent ban on street parking enforced by the HOA, residents struggled to find space for their extra vehicles and visiting guests. True to her character, Karen saw an opportunity in Larry's seemingly empty lot. From her perspective, it was an eyesore, a patch of land that disrupted the aesthetic harmony of Sunny Ridge. Larry's lot, she reasoned, would make the perfect overflow parking area for the community. After all, it was right next door and rarely busy. Without consulting Larry or the HOA board, Karen casually began suggesting at meetings and in neighborhood newsletters that residents could park their vehicles there. It wasn't just audacious, it was outright presumptuous. For Larry, the first sign of trouble came one quiet morning when he arrived at his workshop to find his lot overrun with cars. SUVs, sedans, and even a bright red convertible lined the parking spaces meant for his clients. Some vehicles were parked haphazardly, blocking access to the workshop's entrance and leaving muddy tire tracks on the gravel. Larry's initial confusion quickly turned into frustration. His carefully maintained property was being treated like a public lot, and the thoughtless behavior of the drivers was impossible to ignore. That day, Larry's sense of calm was disrupted. What began as a seemingly small inconvenience hinted at a much larger problem. As he surveyed the chaos, he resolved to get to the bottom of it. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a battle that would test his patience, his resolve, and his willingness to stand up for what was right. Larry's frustration boiled over as the situation with his parking lot went from inconvenient to outright outrageous. The following morning, more cars appeared, some even blocking the loading zone at the workshop's entrance. A few of Larry's regular clients called to complain that they couldn't park, and one even turned back after circling the overcrowded lot several times. This wasn't just an annoyance, it was now interfering with Larry's business. Determined to find answers, Larry decided to contact the Sunny Ridge Homeowners Association. His call was routed to Karen, whose sharp, clipped tone immediately set him on edge. "Yes, this is Karen, president of the HOA," she began. "How may I assist you?" Larry introduced himself and explained the issue. Unauthorized vehicles were using his private property as a parking lot. Surely this was a misunderstanding. Karen's response stunned him. "Oh, that's not a mistake," she said with a hint of condescension. "We've suggested to residents that they utilize your lot as overflow parking. Your property is just sitting there, and frankly, it's an eyesore compared to our community. Allowing us to use it is the least you could do." Larry was momentarily speechless. He quickly regained his composure and reminded Karen that his lot was private property, clearly marked with signs, and not available for public use. He firmly requested that the vehicles be removed immediately. Karen, however, was unmoved. "Listen, Mr. Larry," she said, her voice dripping with mock politeness. "We're a close-knit, prestigious community. You should be proud to contribute to improving our neighborhood's image. I suggest you be a bit more neighborly about this." Her patronizing tone only fueled Larry's anger. "Neighborly? Your residents are trespassing, damaging my property, and disrupting my business. If this doesn't stop, I'll have no choice but to take legal action," he said firmly before hanging up. Hoping the issue would resolve itself, Larry spent the rest of the day focused on his clients. But when he returned to the workshop the next morning, his heart sank. Not only were the cars still there, but now the number had nearly doubled. SUVs, luxury sedans, and even a van had taken over every available space. Some vehicles were parked so carelessly that gravel was strewn across the walkway, and deep tire marks scarred the edges of the lot. A few neighbors had even left notes on their windshields, thanking Larry for his generosity. Furious, Larry decided it was time to escalate. He drafted a formal letter to the HOA, citing local property laws and emphasizing the trespassing violations. He included photos of the offending vehicles and copies of his property deeds. To ensure Karen couldn't claim ignorance, he sent the letter by certified mail and installed additional private property no parking signs around the lot. He even added a motion-activated camera to record evidence. But Karen wasn't one to back down. The next day, she sent out an HOA-wide newsletter doubling down on her stance. "We've received complaints about parking shortages," the newsletter read, "but I'm pleased to announce that we have a temporary solution. The adjacent lot is open for overflow parking. Please remember to park responsibly." There was no mention of Larry's objections. The situation continued to spiral. Clients began canceling appointments, and Larry had to redirect deliveries because trucks couldn't access the loading dock. He even caught sight of Karen strolling through the lot with an air of smug satisfaction, as if she were surveying her kingdom. What pushed Larry over the edge was an early Saturday morning incident. As he arrived at the workshop to prepare for a client's pickup, he found a sleek black sports car parked directly in front of his workshop doors, completely blocking access. Enraged, Larry left a note on the windshield. "This is private property. Move your car immediately, or it will be towed." By noon, the car was still there, and a delivery truck was forced to wait on the street for hours. It was clear Karen had no intention of stopping. Each day, the problem worsened, and Larry's polite attempts to resolve it had only emboldened her. As he stared at the chaos in his lot that evening, Larry realized he was out of options. If Karen wanted a fight, he was ready to give her one. Larry woke up early Monday morning, his resolve steeled. This was no longer a simple misunderstanding or a matter of inconvenience. This was a blatant abuse of his property and an affront to his business. If Karen and her HOA thought they could bully him into submission, they were about to learn a harsh lesson in consequences. He started by making a few phone calls. First, he contacted Big Al's Towing, the best towing service in town, and explained the situation. "We're going to need several trucks," Larry said confidently. Al, known for his no-nonsense approach, assured him that his team would be ready to act at dawn. Next, Larry called his lawyer, an old friend named Max, who specialized in property rights. Max reviewed the certified letters Larry had sent to the HOA and confirmed that he was well within his legal rights to tow the trespassing vehicles. That night, Larry posted notices around his lot warning that any unauthorized vehicles would be towed at the owner's expense. He added bright yellow banners to his existing signs for maximum visibility. Then he spent the rest of the evening setting up his cameras to capture every angle of the lot. This time, there would be no excuses, no denials, and no escape for Karen and her cohorts. By 6 a.m. on Tuesday, the towing operation was in full swing. The first tow truck arrived, its engine rumbling like a battle cry. Larry directed the drivers to prioritize the cars blocking loading zones and entrances. The sleek black sports car that had blocked his doors for days was the first to go. hoisted onto the truck with satisfying efficiency. As the sun rose, a scene of organized chaos unfolded. One by one, cars were hooked, lifted, and hauled away. Some owners arrived just in time to see their vehicles being towed. Their protests met with Larry's calm but firm explanation. "This is private property. You've been warned multiple times." A few tried to argue, but Larry's security camera footage and legal documentation silenced them. The scene grew more intense as more residents arrived. A man in a tailored suit stormed over shouting, "Do you have any idea who I am? That's my Mercedes you're towing." Larry didn't flinch. "And, do you have any idea whose property you've been trespassing on? This isn't a public lot. You can pick up your car at Big Al's Towing once you pay the fees." The man's face turned crimson as he sputtered in disbelief. But Larry had already turned his attention to the next car on the list. By 9 a.m., over 20 vehicles had been towed, and the lot was finally starting to clear. That's when Karen herself arrived, her SUV screeching to a halt at the edge of the lot. She stepped out, phone in hand, recording as she marched toward Larry. "This is harassment," she barked, waving her phone like a weapon. "You're targeting our residents and disrupting our community. I'm calling the police." Larry stood his ground, his calm demeanor only fueling Karen's fury. "Call whoever you want," he replied evenly. "I've documented every warning I've sent you, recorded every incident, and followed every legal requirement. Your residents are trespassing, and I'm simply protecting my property." Karen's face twisted with rage, but she dialed the police anyway as a small crowd of HOA members gathered to watch. When the officers arrived, Larry greeted them with a stack of documents and a thumb drive containing hours of security footage. The lead officer reviewed the evidence and nodded in agreement. "Mr. Larry is within his rights," the officer announced. "This is private property, and he's followed the proper procedures to address the issue. I suggest you resolve this with him amicably." Karen's smug confidence faltered, but she wasn't ready to admit defeat. "This isn't over," she hissed before storming off, her phone still recording. The crowd began to disperse, but Larry wasn't finished. He contacted Max and asked him to prepare a formal cease and desist letter citing trespassing and damages to his property. That evening, Larry sent the letter to Karen and the entire HOA board, ensuring there would be no more excuses or denials. By the time the sun set, Larry's lot was once again clean and orderly. But the real victory was yet to come. As Larry sat on the steps of his workshop, watching the footage from the day's events, he allowed himself a small smile. Karen had underestimated him, but now she knew. He wasn't someone who could be pushed around, and this was only the beginning of her reckoning. The dust from the morning's chaos had barely settled when the HOA called an emergency meeting. Word of Larry's decisive action had spread like wildfire through Sunny Ridge, and the residents were demanding answers. Karen, once the self-assured leader of the community, now faced a room filled with anger and frustration. The tension was palpable as residents gathered in the HOA clubhouse, murmurs and whispers building into a roar of discontent. Larry attended the meeting, not because he was part of the HOA, but because he wanted to ensure his side of the story was heard. He arrived with Max, his lawyer, and a folder containing a damning collection of evidence. Photos of the parked cars, copies of the certified warnings he'd sent, and detailed footage of the towing operation. As he entered the room, the chatter grew louder and all eyes turned toward him. Karen began the meeting with her usual bravado. "Let's address this so-called incident with Mr. Larry," she announced, attempting to regain control. "While I appreciate the need to resolve parking issues, the extreme measures taken were completely unnecessary and disruptive to our community." But Karen's attempt to spin the narrative was short-lived. One resident, a bespectacled man in his 60s, stood up, his face red with frustration. "Unnecessary? Are you serious, Karen? My car was towed because you told us we could park there. Did you even have permission from the owner to use his lot?" Another resident chimed in, their voice sharp with anger. "I had to pay $400 to get my car back, and I missed a work meeting. You said everything was arranged. Were you lying to us?" Larry let them vent for a moment before stepping forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I understand your frustration, but let me be clear. Your cars were parked on my private property without my permission. For weeks, I tried to resolve this amicably, sending multiple warnings and even reaching out to your HOA president directly. Unfortunately, those warnings were ignored. He placed his folder on the table in front of him and opened it, revealing the evidence for everyone to see. Here are copies of the letters I sent, the photos of the vehicles, and video footage of the violations. I had every legal right to protect my property, and I followed the law every step of the way. The room fell silent as the weight of Larry's words sank in. Karen's smug expression faltered as several residents began to murmur again, this time directing their anger toward her. One resident, a retired attorney, spoke up. "Karen, you acted without board approval. This isn't just negligence, it's a breach of your responsibilities as HOA president. You've put us all at risk financially and legally." The atmosphere shifted as residents demanded accountability. Karen tried to deflect, claiming she was only acting in the community's best interest, but the damage was done. A motion was quickly raised to remove her as HOA president, and within minutes the vote passed overwhelmingly. Karen, visibly shaken, was forced to step down on the spot. But Larry wasn't finished. "There's one more matter to address," he said, turning to the remaining HOA board members. "The damage caused to my property, the disruption to my business, and the stress this has caused me are significant. My lawyer has already filed a formal claim, and I expect full restitution for what I've endured." The new interim HOA board, clearly eager to distance themselves from Karen's disastrous leadership, quickly agreed to negotiate. They promised to cover the towing fees for all affected residents and reimburse Larry for the damages to his lot and lost business. Additionally, they proposed a formal contract with Larry, ensuring that any future arrangements involving his property would be properly documented and compensated. As the meeting concluded, Larry felt a sense of closure. Justice had been served, and Karen's iron grip on the HOA was finally broken. But more importantly, he had reclaimed his property and earned the respect of the very community that had once taken advantage of him. Walking out of the clubhouse, Larry couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. Karen's reign was over, and Sunny Ridge had learned a valuable lesson about boundaries and consequences. In the weeks following Karen's removal, Sunny Ridge experienced a profound transformation. The community, once mired in conflict and micromanagement, began to rebuild itself under the leadership of the new HOA board. The new president, a retired judge named Eleanor, was a stark contrast to Karen. Eleanor's first priority was to repair the fractured relationship with the neighboring properties, starting with Larry. The board reached out to Larry with a formal apology and a proposal for a partnership. They drafted a mutually beneficial agreement. During large neighborhood events, Sunny Ridge could use part of Larry's lot for overflow parking in exchange for a rental fee. The contract also guaranteed that HOA members would adhere to strict rules regarding parking times and property maintenance. For Larry, this arrangement not only brought in additional income, but also restored his peace of mind. Beyond the legal agreements, the incident brought about a cultural shift within Sunny Ridge. Freed from Karen's oppressive rule, residents began to embrace a more neighborly approach. Community events, once stiff and overly regulated, became lively gatherings. Residents started building real connections, free from the fear of arbitrary fines or public shaming. Larry's reputation soared. Many residents who had initially viewed him as a stubborn outsider came to respect his resolve. Some even became his customers, commissioning custom furniture and restoration work. Tom, the retired attorney who had called out Karen at the meeting, became a frequent visitor to Larry's workshop, seeking his help with refinishing antique chairs. The lessons from the incident rippled beyond Sunny Ridge. The city council, inspired by Larry's stand, passed a new ordinance requiring HOAs to obtain explicit written consent before using neighboring properties for any community purposes. Dubbed the Karen Rule, the law became a symbol of property rights and the importance of communication. For Larry, the experience was a turning point. His business thrived, his lot became a symbol of fairness, and he found himself enjoying newfound respect from both the Sunny Ridge community and the wider town. Most importantly, Larry had proven that standing your ground could lead to lasting, positive change, not just for him, but for everyone involved. As the dust finally settled, Larry reflected on the whirlwind of events that had tested his patience, resilience, and determination. What began as a frustrating nuisance had evolved into a battle for respect and justice, not only for himself, but for the broader principle of property rights. In standing his ground, Larry had inadvertently become a symbol of perseverance and fairness, earning the admiration of both his neighbors and the community at large. Karen's departure from Sunny Ridge marked a turning point for everyone. The neighborhood, once stifled by her oppressive rule, blossomed under the leadership of a more collaborative and ethical HOA board. Larry's partnership with the new board flourished, and his lot, once a source of contention, became a model of mutual benefit and understanding. For Larry, the experience reaffirmed a valuable lesson. When faced with adversity, standing firm in what is right can lead to meaningful change. His workshop thrived as new clients, some from Sunny Ridge, sought him out not just for his craftsmanship, but for his unwavering principles. Even years later, residents of Sunny Ridge would recount the Great Towing Incident as a defining moment for their community, a time when boundaries were clarified, lessons were learned, and a neighborhood rediscovered its sense of unity. Larry, ever modest, would simply smile and get back to work, knowing that his actions had made a lasting impact far beyond his small workshop.